Welcome to this week's episode of Steelers Touch Down Under. I'm Matty Peverell, joined as always by my co-host Marky Davison. Mark, what's up?
I'll tell you what's up. Oh, my bad. Hang on a moment. Sorry, guys. I'll tell you what's up. I was checking out the YouTube because it wasn't working before. Now we're on fire. But 30 minutes ago we had a storm in the morning, and now it's sunny as. It is so sunny right now, and I can't believe the weather already. Did you get a storm in Sydney? Dead set,
welcome to the weather report with Marky D.
It just amazes me. Half an hour ago.
I think it moved from up to you guys. But it was certainly storming pretty hard the last couple of days. But
half an hour ago it was stormy weather and cloudy all over. Now it's going to be a beautiful sunny day. But I'm pretty well, Matty. It's been a pretty fast week. It feels weird this week because normally we have Super Bowl around this time, and tomorrow we have the Pro Bowl, which is yeesh, meh, jeez, can't. Pro Bowl is terrible. Hasn't been good since Sean Taylor knocked that kicker out. Rest in peace, Sean Taylor, one of the best defensive backs to ever play the game. Knocked him out of his shoes. Hasn't been good since then. It is not good football to watch. So,
you know what though? And I think it sums up where it's at. I get a kick out of watching those skills comps. I always have. I really used to like the NBA ones when I was a kid, but I really like these ones too. And watching some of the players do that sort of stuff, I think that's cool. But I mean, I was talking about it with someone on Twitter this week, and I just think move to the NBA one, move to a rookie versus sophomore one, and then maybe have some team captains that are mixed at the Pro Bowl or All Pro or something like that. But I think it loses its, I guess for me, they haven't played it even remotely tough for about 10 years. Everyone's scared of injuries. I'd much rather them say, let's have 18 games and get rid of the Pro Bowl. I still think you should have and with All Pro, instead of the Pro Bowl stuff where fans vote, maybe it's all AFC and all NFC, and you do it like that, because that's really what it is right now. It's just a fan voted all process. But I mean, the problem for me is you can't have three teams of All Pros. Again, I think they do in the NBA. And they do in the All-American stuff and all that, because at the moment there's players that get bonuses by being in the Pro Bowl. Why do you get a bonus for being in the Pro Bowl?
Doesn't mean anything.
Fan voted.
It really doesn't mean. It's just lost its value so much. Yes, they played really well all year and they deserve to be acclimated and say, oh, you're one of the best players to play in the league this year, 100%. But watching it from when I was younger, it really has just turned into flag football. And I remember one year there was a score 54-45 or something like that. There was no guys even trying. And then Roger the Girl came out and said, oh no, we have to at least try a little bit. And then next year, I think it was 20-19 or 20-15 or something like that. Pro Bowl, it's boring. No one's going to really cover it. But it feels weird because it feels like the Super Bowl now is another week later, and it goes further into February, and it feels like the season needs to be over. We need to address the offseason. Yeah, that's what it kind of feels like for me. I don't want to see the Bengals win, but I really don't care if the Rams win either. I do not care. Actually, I don't care if either team wins. I know it's going to suck if Who Dey win, because how many Who Dey fans are going to say Who Dey gonna beat them up? It's going to be annoying. It's going to be annoying for a year, so we don't want that. But
yeah, I know what you mean. It's just I think it's a really weird time as a Steel fan. Look, let's talk about it in the live chat right now about the Senior Bowl, and obviously, we're doing the show, so I've kind of missed most of the second half and prepping for the show and stuff like that. But I'm keen to watch that back, and then I've still got to finish off half of the East West Shrine Bowl because it's during our time for work, and there's all that sort of stuff from a draft perspective. But if that feels far away from where the Steelers are at the same time, I know it's critical. I love the draft. But in Sean Manahan's back to the game. But I think it's just, it's a really interesting time when also we've got coordinator spots to fill on the defensive side of the football. Some of us probably wish it was an offensive coordinator as well. You've got the GM hunt going on. And it kind of feels like everything's on pause until the Super Bowl's over. The teams that don't have a head coach obviously making hires. So you saw Doug Peterson named as the Jacksonville Jaguars coach. He was actually an early favorite for that. So it's interesting that they went through all of the, some discussions with Leftwich, and then I know that they also had the GM. He said, "I'm not joining unless the GM goes." So it's kind of interesting. Brad Jewett says he's watching the Senior Bowl and listening to us, which is beautiful. That's what we love. I'd be doing the same thing if I wasn't co-hosting the show with Mark. But yeah, it is a really interesting time, and I think that's why we want to talk today about Kevin Colbert, because I think there's some things we really need to be thinking about from that, and we want to get back to really assessing where the Steelers are at. But it's funny, obviously we had the confirmation this week of Brady retiring, and we saw things like Juju with Dak Prescott, and I just think this offseason more than ever, it just feels a bit weird. And I think as well, part of it is like it's coming back to normal in like the wider sense of things. Like it's not the pandemic's kind of moving on, so we're gonna have a combine, for example, and what have you. But for the Steelers, there's so much change, and it's just sort of interesting to think, like no franchise quarterback, Kevin Colbert's last draft, defensive coordinator change, which is pretty substantial in how long Keith Butler had been there. Yeah, it's kind of this new era, and it's sort of interesting to see.
And every fan around the world, Steeler Nation, everybody wants a different quarterback. There's 1% who wants Duck. There is 2% who wants Mason. There is 5% who want Haskins. There are even a majority who want Dobbs. There are people out there who want to have Aaron Rodgers to come in, which I don't think is going to happen. There are fans out there who wish to have Jimmy, which please no to Jimmy. But if he comes over, I have to be a fan. There are Derek Carr. There are so many. We have never been through this in the last 18 years where the speculation for QB has been so high. And at this point, we're kind of like, who's going to be our QB? And right now, Matty, I don't care. I don't care who we have right now, because I think we have much bigger issues than QB at the moment. Like, that's going to sort itself out once the Super Bowl goes and we go into free agency. We haven't hit that yet. So, people are talking Malik Willis, people are talking Kenny Pickett. I know you're talking Carson Strong. As we sit here now, we are in a funny time look, it's only January, and I think we have to go through the processes and be truthful. As being podcasters too, we can't speculate if Kenny's going to come here and the next minute Kenny gets picked up by the Dolphins. I just think we need to all relax. And there are much bigger issues. Like, I looked at the stats. Here's one thing to look into, right? Did you know that the Benny Snell had 96 yards rushing the whole year? That is bad. That is terrible for a second running back behind Harris. That's only one of my key points.
Well, yes and no. I mean, I think the fact that Najee Harris could stay, not be injured up until the last week of the season, basically, and play through 17 games in his rookie year. Like, that is a big, and Snell would have gone backwards behind that line. And I know that feeds into the point you talk about, but I think that's a testament to, Najee and his health, and his work. But I mean, as Sean Manahan says, like, we do need a new offensive scheme, in my opinion. I'm not thrilled to see Canada back. I'm not going to sit here all off season and go, boo, woe is Canada, because there's no point me doing that, right? And I also don't think he had the opportunity to really mold that team in the way he wants to with Ben and stuff. But and as I said, I really want to stick to not talking about Senior Bowl and stuff like that today. I think we really want to focus on the Steelers organization as it is. But I sat there and watched that first quarter with Malik Willis, and I get his mobility is incredible. Like, one of the fastest college players in, literally the fastest college players, the fastest quarterback. He's, he did a run this week at the Senior Bowl that was faster than all but one of Kyler Murray's runs, and Kyler Murray's the fastest quarterback in the NFL right now. Great. But he hardly threw a ball at the Senior Bowl. Is he? And I know that we need mobility at quarterback's key, and I know he can throw the football, but I'm just sort of sitting there going, if we're talking about quarterbacks, I want to see more throwing the football. I know he can run. I want to see him throw the football. That's what the quarterback's got to do. That's what you want in a franchise quarterback. So is that the right guy for us? I don't really know. But, I think moving back to Colbert, you know, Mark, you talk about there's some things going wrong, and you told me off air about culture. Before we get into Colbert, and I think some of it, I mean, it's kind of related. Like the GM fosters and creates the team. Obviously, there's people that support into it. The Steelers do it different to other organizations where a GM, hires, the coach and can fire the coach and all the rest of it. The dynamics are a bit different with the Steelers and where Art Rooney dips in, and I think he dips in more than what people realize, but probably not as much as Dan Rooney did. Yeah, I'm keen to find out from you when you talk about culture, where are you finding issues with what's there?
Well, where do we kind of start? We're in the different generation right now. We're in the TikTok generation. No offense to Chase or Juju. We're in the generation now where it's like, yes, you're a football player, but they're going outside the realm of just football, and they're building their business and building their brand as a player. Fair enough. You go and make all your money, you do that, okay? But as a product on the field, sometimes there is a bit lackluster. And in Claypool's, shoes, he had one big year, really bad second year. Is he all about the game, or is he all about the brand? So that's one aspect of the culture. Another one, I don't think we have a true leader. There's Cam, but I think we need a pump up guy, a crazy guy like Farrier back in the day. But however, my views have been, taken over by 2004 and 2008 defense. I miss that stuff so much, and we have not got that on the defense.
Okay, so I want to ask you a question, though. I want to ask you a question on that. Those guys didn't just walk in and be like that, right?
No.
Right? So if you're looking at the team as it's built right now, even if there's guys that are off contract that we would have to assume would re-sign, who are the players that you would like to see step into that role? Because as I say, all the guys that you talk about that are rah-rah, leaders weren't necessarily rah-rah leaders when they came into the Steelers, or they weren't rah-rah leaders on the other teams that they came from necessarily, right? So who do you think sits there right now and is that, rah-rah leader?
Well, I think it's got to do with like TJ Watt going up, playing unbelievable again. Like he will, but he also needs to have someone, behind the depth chart or with TJ Watt and go out there and also get 6 sacks or 4 sacks when he's off. Like it can't rely on TJ Watt or Joe Hayden or Minka. And I even looked at the stats too with our defense. Minka had the most tackles. So we are missing a certain something on this defense like that. And I know we missed Alualu. I know we missed Stephon Tuitt, but there is just something missing there. And it's all good all year. In the last 2 or 3 years, every time they lose, they go, oh, we got to improve. We need to improve. We need to do this. We need to do that. It's not good enough. It's getting to a point where it's not good enough. Now, I'm a biggest fan. I'm a massive fan. But you got to call it out what it is. Because every time they lose like that, or the defense gives up 140 yards, I think, this year, average running the football is bad. So there is something missing there. There is something missing in that culture, in that locker room. And, Juju's out there, nothing against him, but he's out there saying, oh, our locker room, they're wooden things, they're terrible. Cowboys have a better locker room. Doesn't mean anything. The players need to get together and have barbecues again and get around. And maybe COVID, got involved in that. And like there used to be a family, like the 04-08 team was a family. They still text each other. You can see that on the play. You can see how William Gay got involved, and he was the slot cornerback, and he really did things. And Troy did everything, and they got around Troy. The only real guys right now on defense that I really like that are really standouts is TJ and Cam, and the rest of the other guys are just guys. There are some good players out there for sure, but there's no mentality of like the 3rd and 13s. They can't finish. There's something missing and something needs to change. And I don't know
what that's coaching. It's
coaching. It's scheme. It's actually manning up. It's not letting TJ go and do all the work and getting 22.5 sacks and no one else can do anything. It's better, like you said, with Colbert, better drafting or something like that. There is just something missing in this team, and we are on the decline. What it feels like, but we have a fresh start to go and be something as well with a new quarterback and get the offensive, moving. Didn't help as well. Didn't help that Big Ben and the offense couldn't move the ball.
We're very lucky. All right, let's ask you this question then. If you and I are sitting here in 12 months' time and the Steelers made the wild card or the divisional round and they had, let's say, an 11-6 season, right? give or take a win and loss either side. Do you call that a success?
Well, it's improvement. And also next season too, I think if we get into the opponents or in the off season, we have a pretty good schedule against the opponent. I think we're versing the Falcons. I think we're versing a lot of these low teams. But if we go 11-6 and we make the wild card, 100%. But something needs to change where we're winning these games. And every week, like Cam Hayward will go out there and he kind of knows, like, when you're in a job, when you're the best player and no one else around you is doing anything, and you have to stand up, you have to stick up for them and say, oh, we tried our best out there, but you're rubbish. When you're rubbish like that as a player, that kind of hurts you because you're trying your hardest, like TJ Watt and Cam and Minka. Minka's coming up to the box to make tackles all the time. And when this is happening and like you're one of the best players and you still can't get to the young blokes to get things moving or get things around the scheme or the identity of the defense, you're in a bit of trouble. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah, I just sort of wonder because the culture right now gets you to the playoffs, right? The culture right now is the team that loses in the playoffs. So, like, I had to sort of sit there and I'm like, if you're talking about improvement on culture, they've got to actually win because you talk about the texting thing. That team from 2008 does that because, yes, I think there's some standout blokes on that team. But they also won. And winning helps. And I think it's kind of interesting when you talk about culture specifically and whether it's cultural mentality, because you look at some of the players that we've watched walk out of this franchise over the last decade, and some of them needed to go. But you take AB, for example. How many games did we win with AB? How many touchdowns and yards did, AB rack up? But was he a good individual? No. So that affects your culture. So I guess this is the thing is this is hybrid between how do you create a winning culture, how do you create a positive culture, but do so with the right players. And, not every player that's going to be able to win you a game is going to be a good personality. And I'm not saying that therefore you forgo a good personality and you go with that talent, someone that's going to bring down that locker room. But I think that's where it becomes really complex. And I think that's where, having a right GM is really, really important, and a GM that can understand talent and see talent.
Well, it's even the idea too with I'm not into much of the numbers, but we let go of Mike Hilton, right? And he was actually a pretty good piece for the defense. And now he's playing fantastic with the Bengals. Also, at the start of the year, Vince Williams was going to play. The next day, he said, "See you later, I retire." And then all the issues with Alualu and stuff onto it. So something is missing. And I don't think Cameron Hayward and TJ Watt and Minka can fill the void. Devin Bush had a down year, but coming back from injury. But there is something there that they're not playing the true Steeler way. And that could be the disconnect of actually, life goes on and it's different. It's 2022. And I'm hanging on to 08.
I was about to say, no. And because I want to ask you another question. So I had an interesting take during the week, right? You look at the two teams in the Super Bowl. The Bengals O-line is actually pretty crap, right? Mm-hmm. You look at the Rams O-line. It's a bit better, but it's not even a top 15 O-line in this league, really. Definitely not a top 10 O-line. And everyone says build the O-line and get better. Now, we have a first-round running back in Najee Harris. We need to do that, right, from the running game perspective. But those teams are stacked at wide receiver. Those teams both have a decent running back. Is the old way of doing things necessarily going to do it? And the reason I say this is you think about if you're a Bengals fan, right? 2 years ago, you're sitting there going, we stink. We absolutely stink. We've got to change everything up. They do things very differently, right? And they go out and they get, some really key guys. They go out and spend money when they've got cap space, all the rest of it. Well, we've got cap space now. We have potential for some good draft picks. We don't have a franchise quarterback. We are going to see a change in GM at some point in the next 12 months. That may be bringing someone externally, but it's very likely probably working out some agreement, minimum Brandon Hunt, but hopefully Brandon Hunt, no Marcon. Do we need to move away from what we've done to change the culture as you talk about and end up bringing it back? Do we have to do an almost 270-degree turn not complete 360 because we'll end up in the same spot. But do we have to do a 270 or a 180 to get into a situation where we are contending again?
Well, the whole idea of the game is changing. There's no more like Owen says here. Vince was a big thumper up the middle. The whole idea of the game is changing now. Like with the Bengals, they have 3 stars. If you want to call them stars, that receiver and some good tight ends and a good running back and a good mobile quarterback in Joe Burrow.
They're stars. Jamar Chase is top 5 wide receiver.
Yeah, well, who's the other guy? Not Higbee. That's the guy from.
They've got Higgins, who plays like sort of like a hybrid. The last game he basically had to play as a tight end. Then they've got Tyler Boyd. And we've got someone else as well. But yeah, I mean they're stacked.
They're stretching the field already. So even having those three receivers on the field, the defense is already thinking, how am I going to stop all 3 guys at once? So therefore, there's going to be open routes available. The Bengals, what could be interesting for the Bengals, right? Like you said with the O-line, what if they go out and lose the Super Bowl? Are they going to turn into the Falcons or the Panthers and have 1 year and that's it? Or are they going to build
that
something?
Franchise is stacked, man. I don't want to go deep on the Bengals, but I talked about it in War Room 2 weeks ago. The cap room they've got, the picks they've got, they're here to stay.
They have a lot of pressure. They have never really dealt with winning before. And on the flip side, we haven't really dealt with losing as a Steeler. The Steelers have now lost 4 playoff games in a row, and we're getting that territory right. We could be the cellar dweller of the AFC North, and we don't want to be there. But you're right. What's our identity going to be for this team? And I think it has to start with defense. Like I was even talking to another bloke on my Steel Nation Australia, and I was like, do we draft? Do we draft defense? Like, why is everyone looking around quarterback? Like, I think you need to set the standard for defense, and we're going to stop something there. And also, we're getting a new defensive coordinator. There needs to be big change there for that organization to actually, like, it's actually disgraceful and terrible that they let in 140 yards average and 43 points average over 4 games in the playoffs. There is just something missing in this team, and it's not the old Steeler way. And like, I know I'm living in the past in 2008 and 2010, but we haven't got the team, like you said, with Big Ben anymore and AB, Martavius Bryant, those fellas, to go and score 35 points. We could only score 20 points last year. So this is a very question mark year, isn't it?
But then this is the point, because for me, you've got to pick.
All right, I'll take over for what Matty was going to say as his dog's going off. But what I'm saying too, this is all the fans around the world are saying, which QB are we going to get? We've got to fix the O-line. There's so many different kinds of holes in the draft in this offseason that you could pretty much say anything and be right, because we don't know what's going to happen. Last year, you knew that you had Big Ben, and he's pretty much his final year. You there, Matty, or we turn this into a monologue?
Yeah, so this is the point. Like, what do you do on defense or offense? Because you can't put pressure on defense to only be able to keep teams to 20 points, right? If you do that, you're stuffed. And this is what I mean. Like, they're gonna have to pick something to focus on to be able to deliver.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're gonna have to pick, like as you say, defense. Like, I think they need another edge rusher, but this draft is thick with them. But if you go pick an edge rusher first, everyone go, why don't you pick a quarterback, right? Like, I think cornerback is actually the number one need on this, because I think you need to fill some of that O-line in free agency. And that's the thing, everyone's telling you in the draft what needs to happen. But what about free agency? Because that's going to change everything up, right? And so this is my thing, that this is where I worry with Matt Canada, is I do think he deserves a chance to do something. But the way that he builds an offense is so particular that we may end up, if it doesn't work, how does that stuff us up in 2023 and 2024? Because you've drafted some players to fit there. You've signed guys to contracts to sit there.
That's the question we don't know.
People bring up like Linderbaum and Penning. Linderbaum, we got bigger needs. Like, people will be shocked in that. But you can get a veteran center that will do what he will do in his first year, or go pretty close to it. Penning, aggressive. But if Matt Canada's system doesn't work, what's Penning like in pass pro? I think he's not bad, but is he the best pass pro tackle? Probably not. And this is the problem.
Yeah. Well, it's gonna be very, like, I know we all focus on Kenny Pickett and for the QB, but I've been saying this for the last, I think, few weeks. The QB won't save an organization. Yes, it can help with Joe Burrow and what he did with the Bengals, and now they're in the Super Bowl. But I don't think we're not a QB away from the Super Bowl, unless somehow we were to get Aaron Rodgers and he came in and it was all kind of roses and everything was happening. But I don't think at this point, if we invest our time into a QB with Pickett or a guy like that, I still like at this point to see what happens with Mason. If Mason were to do something, then he could be our bridge. We could get set on offense. We could get set on defense. And also, Matty, you want to still talk about a bit of Colbert too, right? With his kind of culture and how he's going to be missed as well. This is his last draft, right?
Yeah, so let's get into Colbert. Before we do, let's go back to our usual segment as always, Slinging the Slang. So we've had to change it up with no Big Ben. So it's now just as TJ Watt likes to sack the quarterback, we like to sling the slang. And Marky D, you've got something a bit different that we're going to do this week. We're going to play a game with a little bit of the live chat. Tell us about it.
All right. So I've got the old for the audio listeners in the YouTube live chat. I've got this. One of my neighbors gave me this book. I think it was last year. I just found it again. It's called the True Blue Guide to Australian Slang. If you can see it there. True Blue, mate. That's mine. Nah. If you guys can, whoever can, just give me a page number between 1 and 100, and I'll choose a word out of that. Because there's that many in there. I've actually run out of stories. I've got no more Australian slang. We're actually you and I are turning more into American podcasts each and every day. Like, hello there, hi, welcome. That's terrible. 133. All right, we'll see if that goes that far. Oh, Brad, mate, you can't do 133. I'll do 90. I'll do 90, just me. All right. Let's have a look here. But I've also got to choose because there's quite a lot of swear words in this little book here. So, okay. Matty, on the scale, number between 1 and 10.
7.
All right. I've never heard of this one ever. I've never heard. Okay. So apparently, have you ever heard of this before? Rot gut. Do you know what rot gut is?
Oh, yeah. Isn't it when you've got like diarrhea?
No. Apparently, rot gut in Australian slang is very cheap alcohol. I've never heard of that in my life.
Yeah, I can understand.
But is that like kind of what's that that cheap wine that comes in a box? I talked about that a few last year. Yeah, goon. Yeah.
Well, it's actually for those listening on, so it's cask wine, but goon is what we call it. That's its nickname.
That's right.
You pull out the foil bag from them.
Yeah,
ones in, and we call them goon bags.
I was talking to Jeff about that. I remember we got the label here is called Colbert or Colbert or something like that. And I don't know. It's something like it's like $5 for a box for 4 liters. And we used to drink and go, Colbert. Oh, no, it's like Colbert or something like that. Some other, out there somewhere. But yeah, rot gut is very cheap alcohol. And I've done it before. I've had the old goon bag or the old wine, and it's terrible, mate. It gives you a bad headache. It turns you into a different person. You're not the same.
You know what? I'm proud, and I'm probably one of very few Australians. I've never drunk out of a goon bag.
I've done it a few times. Because when I wasn't even that poor. I just because it was $5, it was just cheap. And you get like a cask between your few mates, and it's 4 liters, and it's so like fruity Lexia. That's what we used to call it.
No.
Yeah, fruity Lexia makes you sexier. That's what used to be the slang. All right, I think I've said enough. What's yours? Do you want one out of the book?
We'll take a pause on the book. Mine is Bolter. And so this can sound pretty interesting, but like Bolter, and it's spelled ER, but you say it more with an A if you're using it for the slang. And in the context that we often use it is in sport, where you've got it like sometimes a bolter, some people say it's someone that runs away, or an animal that runs away, but we use it often in Australian, New Zealand sport to describe when someone comes from completely outside and takes position in a sports team, or they might be a rookie and then they end up doing incredibly well and you didn't expect it. And like in some ways, Tom Brady being a 6th-round draft pick and then taking over as quarterback, and leading the team to great success, that would be a bolter. Najee Harris is not a bolter. He's an absolute stud. But we've seen, Highsmith's just a bolter there, came out of nowhere to take, a really prominent role for the Steelers. So that was mine this week. And I thought it was pretty interesting considering where we're at with the draft. And there's bolters now that are rocking up and breaking into the top 100 and, what are the rankings and the mock drafts and all that sort of stuff.
I got to give you.
You're looking like something's gone off foul.
Yeah, well, I got to give you a penalty, mate. It's not in here. It's not in here, mate. Bolter's not in there.
That's not the only document that ever describes any Australian slang.
According to my sources, all right, better than Adam Schefter, bolter is not in the True Blue Guide to Australian Slang. I'm sorry, it's not there. We have bold as a bandicoot. That's in there.
Righto. Right, back to Colbert. So I wanted to talk about Colbert. 22 seasons with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's had one losing season. The losing season got him in a position to pick Ben. He's had 4 seasons at, 9-7 or 9-6-1. 4 seasons with 8 wins, 3 seasons with 10 wins, 3 seasons with 11 wins, 4 seasons with 12 wins, 2 seasons with 13, and 1 season with 15. That's 13 double-digit win seasons out of 22. That's almost 66% there. That's pretty incredible. How do the Steelers need to approach getting their next GM to be able to continue with that kind of success?
Just ask Kevin Colbert who's his best option. I don't know. The success has been great. If anyone thinks that we've been a bad team over the last 20 years because we haven't won all the Super Bowls, you're kidding yourself. You're absolutely kidding yourself. Like I wrote a few stats as well. So, or similar to yours, right?
Yeah.
Kevin Colbert won 26 games, 124 losses, 3 ties, 15 wins, and 12 losses in the playoffs. 2 Super Bowls and 1 loss. That's pretty good. Okay. So a lot of fans out there, look, it's not the diehard fans. It's a lot of fans, we can't win. We can't do this. We can't win the Super Bowl. Oh, we should have won with AB. We should have won there. That's a pretty good season. If you were Kevin Colbert and you said, hey guys, unfortunately I only got you 2 Super Bowls and I only got you 226 wins. I wish I could have done more. You'd be like, mate, that's fine. You've done a really good job, to bridge 22 years as a GM. That's it's going to be very hard to replace him, and we'll see what kind of direction we go in. And more stuff about the draft, right? Who's going to do better, or what kind of schematics that's going to happen with drafting certain players for this team to influence Matt Canada or the defensive coordinator, or who's going to work out with Tomlin. I want to do this. I want to do on a bit of a rant here. Okay, go through the AFC North. The Browns, if you can compare them to what the Browns did, the Browns GM, they've had 10 GMs since 2000. 10.
And we're not talking 10 cars. We're talking 10 general managers.
Yes, exactly. I've actually got a GM. It's quite good.
You've got an MG, don't you?
Yeah, that's General? Is that General Motors? I don't know. Is it?
No.
Well, whatever, mate.
Swapping the initials in your head and swapping up the brands. That's fantastic.
Anyways, the MG is a great car. Okay, Browns. Let's put on the Browns, right, mate? Don't roast me. The Browns have had 10 GMs since 2000. That's 10 and 0 Super Bowl wins. That's the only stat I wrote for the Browns in the AFC North. Let's move on from there. Okay. 31 years. Mike Brown, was it is Mike Brown still the GM of the Bengals? Yeah, I think he is.
Yes, I think he is.
So according to my notes here, right. 31 years, son of Paul Brown for the Bengals. Record 202 wins, 291 losses, and 4 ties. 2-7 in the playoffs, but they've actually won now 3, so they're 5-7.
He's president, not GM.
Oh, it was same thing.
It's above GM.
He needs to be doing something. All right. So they have 0 Super Bowls, right? The only one that I would find that is in comparison to Colbert was Ozzie Newsome from the Ravens. They've won 2 Super Bowls. He's got and he went to, I think it was 1995 to 2018. 205 wins, 178 losses, and 2 Super Bowls and 15-9. Like for the other two teams in the division, Colbert has killed it.
Yeah.
Okay? From a stat wise and just winning everything. Now, what's going to happen with the new guy? I don't really know. But that's going to be very hard to live up to. Even getting one Super Bowl would be amazing.
Yeah. So, okay. So I'll ask you another question. Let's say Colbert wasn't retiring. Would you have confidence in Colbert for another 5 seasons?
Well, from his stats, yes. And
what if no Super Bowl? What if no Super Bowl? So 25 years.
If we're getting better and winning that first playoff game and getting back in rhythm and doing like what the kind of
exactly the same as it's been going for the last 10, let's say, decade.
Well then, get rid of him. Like if it's 5 losing seasons and like that, and his stats start to mellow out, then you've got to, maybe that's why he's moving on. Like you're moving on from a good ticket. Like you've done really well.
Well, this is what I wonder, because Andrew Wilbar in the BTSC, who writes articles, and I think there's some discussion around, he's going to feature more on some of the podcasts and what have you that we do here at Behind the Steel Curtain, your one-stop shop for all things Pittsburgh Steelers. He and I both have talked about this at length in the Slack, BTSC Slack channel, about the importance of trading back. Like last year, great draft to trade back. This year is a fantastic draft at 20 to trade back. If there's not the absolute player that you are 100% confident on as a franchise at 20, trade back and get multiple picks in the top 50 to top 100. That's what you want, right? Because if you look at the hit rate across the league, Colbert's hit rate on first-round draft picks is pretty decent, right? But if you look at the hit rate across the league, year in, year out on first-round draft picks, it's a lot more hit and miss than what people think they are. And the second and third round, that becomes value. It's A, cheaper. B, you can get multiple picks there for one first-round draft pick. That increases your ability to build a team. When you look at the holes that we have in the Steelers this season, I'm like, yes, build that team, right? Even if you're getting, you're trading back so that you're the first pick in the second round, right? Now, the advantage of a first round, which is why I thought Najee's deal was good, was good to get Najee last year, was that with the first rounder, you get 5 years that they are there on the contract because you got the 5th-year option, whereas all the other guys, it's 4 years. But Colbert's not trading back. That's not what he does. He's done it once, right? And so I sit there and I'm like, with the league shifting to this, like you look at the LA Rams, right? Now, obviously they've mortgaged a lot of picks the last 2 seasons to get Stafford and to get Von Miller. But before that, you look at it even then, before the last sort of 18 months, they have got the majority of their top players from the 2nd and the 3rd round, even big contributors from the 6th round. So with that being the case, as the Steelers move forward, as the league changes the way it's operating like that and getting proven performers in key positions instead, is that an era where it's just different from what Colbert's used to? Like, yes, he's had success. I think he's retired. I think he's moving on because he's had that success. It's the right time you go out on a winning position.
Mm-hmm.
But if he was to stay another 5 seasons, would be feeling good about it. And yes, you can take great amount of confidence in what's happened before. But what's happened before doesn't predict the future. It gives you good insight and good probability, but it doesn't mean it's going to happen in the future. And I think, that's quite interesting to think about with Colbert. I think he has set this franchise up. There are players that he has drafted over the last 10 years that have meant that we've been able to do this. There's players over the last 3 seasons that have made sure that we're in a winning position. The coaches have to do the right things with them. As Sean Manahan alluded to in the live chat earlier, people have to stay healthy as well.
Mm-hmm.
Health is a big thing. And you've seen some problems there with the Steelers over the last decade where we've had first-round draft picks that have not been able to stay healthy. So I just think it's really interesting from that perspective when you look at it. Speaking of draft, though, with Colbert, not to slight him, he's had some incredible players in terms of those that he's drafted, in terms of the guys that have started. But, out of the 175 players they've drafted since he did take over as GM, 96 never actually had a starting season.
Really?
So that's quite interesting. But 55 started more than 2 seasons, which is pretty good when you think about that over 22 seasons. That means at least 2 players in every draft become bona fide starters.
Did you ring up Colbert? Where'd you find out these stats?
I pulled up. So I had to go through Pro Football Reference, and I downloaded this part of this segment called the
Like,
Franchise
who knows
Encyclopedia,
that?
and then I picked the draft up, and then I basically had to go into a spreadsheet, and I removed every draft pick ever before 2000, and then I was able to sort it out by like the starts.
You're such a stealer nerd, and I love it. Like,
Yeah,
who
I can
knows
tell you
that?
anything about those drafts. I can literally tell you anything about the players that he's drafted.
So let me
Well,
get
not
this straight.
anything and everything,
Let me
but I
get
can
this
tell you
straight.
a few stats and stuff.
For a guy that doesn't watch the draft too much until it's on, then I get all excited about whoever they drafted, right?
Yeah.
That's my go. There's 175 players he's drafted, you said, and 96 you said were not starters.
Never starters. They never had a starting. But remember, the thing to caveat, right? That's who starts on the field, right? So sometimes a tight end might not be on the field, or a wide receiver might not be on the field.
They do what the Rams did the other day.
A bit of perspective.
Didn't the Rams the other day run on that the center for like one snap, and he got to get the start to get the actual I don't know, maybe he's the left tackle, the old fella. I don't remember his name. He's like 40 years old for the Rams, and one of the offensive line guys. They ran him on, so he got the start, and they ran him off, so he didn't play.
100%.
So weird. Yeah, 100%. Whitworth, I think it is. Is it Whitworth? I don't know, but that's crazy. Wait, did you have more stats going on? Because you said okay, yeah. Wow.
So there were 55 that started more. Were players that started more than 2 seasons.
Yeah, right. Yeah, Brad says here it's Andrew Whitworth. He ran on to get a start. So these, I guess that meant that stat doesn't mean too much because they run someone on.
But remember, I'm talking about guys that he's drafted too, so not necessarily older guys. And like a lot of people, I would have to go through and look up each individual person's contract, which I do not have the time to necessarily do in the time that I had to turn this around. But if someone leaves after their rookie deal, then they're not starting for you anymore. So this is starting seasons with the Steelers.
I'm going to put you on the hot seat. Did you find out what colleges they're all from?
Yeah, so I can tell you which ones he's drafted the most from as well, if you like. Yeah. So Wisconsin, he's drafted 4 players, which is pretty up there. Texas A&M, he's drafted 4 players. He's drafted 4 players from Texas. He's drafted 5 players from Tennessee. He's drafted 5 players from Penn State, 3 from Oklahoma State. Ohio State is clearly number 1. He's drafted 8 players from there. And then probably the other big one, Miami, they've drafted 5 players as well. Illinois, 3 players, which I thought was just interesting that there were 3. Georgia was 5. Florida State was 6. Florida there, 5. What else have we got? Alabama, only 3 players from Alabama.
It actually sounds like you had a conversation with Kevin Colbert and you got all these, all this information. And I'm just impressed. I'm impressed by your knowledge that is happening right now on Behind the Steel Curtain. You won't find anywhere else because no one's as dedicated as Matty Peverell here. Did you find out what color shirt he was wearing while he drafted these players?
I can tell you that when I watched the draft, I know he wears like a gray or a checkered shirt. I think he's worn them with a vest, like knits or like a vest knit sweater or just a knit sweater in general with a V-neck, like 3 to 5 years in a row.
You know what's kind of interesting though is like a lot of these, the guys behind the scene, they get forgotten about a lot, and I don't really look into them as much as we do. And we can't say. The only reason I can say that Kevin Colbert was a good GM and he will be missed, right, is because of his stats, right? I cannot. Yeah. I'm so far away in Australia. So are you. We don't know what kind of person he is. He's probably a nice person, good guy. Probably he's a player's kind of guy. But 22 years in the league like that, you have to give that guy credit. It does feel like the end of an era it's coming. Like Tomlin's still there, which I love Tomlin. Ben's going. Colbert's going. It's who's next and. We're in a funny transitional period, aren't we? And it's hard for me to let go of Big Ben and even talking about like he's been there 22 years, Colbert, and done all these things, and you've just done like a whole rap sheet on him. Probably better.
Well, I can tell you. Do you want another fun stat that I can tell you?
Yes.
I'm just pulling it up. You're all into it now. You're like, this is fantastic. I'll have to share with you my spreadsheet. So Colbert has drafted, out of all the players he's drafted, I said that some didn't start, but 35, and this is obviously I think this is only with the Steelers. the way this numbers is played. But anyway, it's games played, so maybe it's other teams as well. But of all the players he's drafted, he had 33 players play more than 100 games in the NFL.
Right. And what do you not understand the league average, or is that pretty?
Yeah,
cool?
well, like a running back has an average of like less than 2.2 years, right? So, and then like most of the time it's going to have been 16 games, maybe give or take playoffs. I think the average in the league is like 50 games, maybe.
Right. So almost about what is that? 20%? 33 out of 175? Is that 20%? No.
That's right.
What percentage of players would that be from 33 out of 175? Because those guys they're 33 players.
33, it's like 1/6. It's over 1/6.
They're gonna be setting the identity of your team, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's high or not, but that's what you need. That's what you need in the draft. You need guys like that. So you're not constantly doing what the Browns do, is ship everyone out.
Yeah, and it's quite interesting, right? So then you look at what he's done elsewhere outside of that. So let's say the average is 50, right? Or let's say the average is 60 games, yeah? Then he has 66 players. So that's literally 1/3 of his players beat the NFL average in terms of games played.
Right. Yeah. Any more deep dives on Kevin Colbert?
I don't know whether anyone will care a bit more. I don't know how much deeper it can really. What I started to do, and then I realized it was just a mammoth task, is I tried to work out how long someone had played to, but it doesn't measure the years that way, right? So it'll tell you they were drafted in this year and then they played to this year. It doesn't tell you the cumulative number of years that they actually played. Obviously, the games give you a good insight. But yeah.
Here's an interesting thought for you, Matty. So with Kevin Colbert and Big Ben, were these drafts for Big Ben? Either way, on the offense or to help him out on the defense to get a guy that might show up the run and give Ben a chance. And he was drafting for Ben, right? These last 18 years or 17 years.
Well,
right?
I don't know if he was the full time, right? Like, that's a great question you ask. I think they drafted to help Ben out, certainly over the last decade, right? But you think back to his first few years, they were trying to keep that defense firing. They were keeping the running backs, they were keeping the O-line. And then you also think about it from the perspective of, if that rumor is true that the 49ers said no to a trade right before, in 2010 or 11 in Singletary, I think it was that said no. Maybe I got that wrong, but I know, or whoever it was that said no. I find that quite interesting, because are you drafting for Ben at that point? Are you drafting to put, when you kept him, to put certain pieces around? Like, I think there are some seasons you do. Look at what we've done at wide receiver. Look at last year. We obviously wanted Najee. We knew we needed Najee for after Ben. But even Freiermuth, like I keep saying, Freiermuth, the fantastic thing is Freiermuth is going to be developed when we go get our next franchise quarterback. I think that's fantastic. But at the same time, it gave Ben a weapon. Claypool Claypool in 2020, second round draft pick, right? It was our first draft pick in the draft. We had other needs to fill. We used a wide receiver to get some. Now, yes, you start talking about things like best player available. But to answer your question, I think it's 50-50 or 2/3, 1/3. So 2/3 drafting for Ben, 1/3 drafting to help other parts of the team out. But I think it's also, when we say drafting to help Ben, are we saying drafting offensive playmakers in a line to help Ben, or are we drafting a defense that can mean that Ben doesn't have to, put the team on his back game in, game out? And this is, again, why I talk about complementary football. It's you've got to have this cohesion between it. You've got to have this symbiotic relationship where one feeds into the other.
Are there players, when you're doing your stats right on Kevin Colbert there, were there players that we may have missed in these drafts, that players we should have gotten, or they're like absolute duds that didn't work out?
Well, it's funny you say that too. I'll give you an example, which is not actually the Steelers, right? But how's this? Yeah. So I took this photo. I saw it on social media this morning. So in the actual draft that Myles Garrett came out of, I think it was 2017, they picked Myles Garrett first overall. Then they picked their other first round draft pick was Jabril Peppers, and then their third first round draft pick was David Njoku, right? They're all decent players in the league. Deshaun Kaiser was their second round pick. Larry Ogunjobi was their 3rd round pick at 65. Their 4th round pick at 126 was the Cleveland Browns with Howard Wilson. And the 5th round, they drafted Roderick Johnson. I don't know who that guy is, at 160, right? Now, if they had I'll tell you who, if they had drafted the players that were available at all those picks, this is the draft they would have had, right? Patrick Mahomes, Tre'Davious White, TJ Watt, Alvin Kamara, Cooper Kupp, George Kittle, and Aaron Jones.
Yeah.
Right?
Fair
and
enough.
The reason I say that example, even though we're obviously talking about Steelers, we're on a Steelers podcast, is there are always players available at different positions. Like, I sit there and I had a bit of an argument on Twitter about it because someone said, they felt that everything's Tomlin's fault. And I said, it's not. Like, he gets given certain players. And he said, well, look at the draft picks. And when you do look at the draft picks, over the last decade, we have missed a few in the first round, but we're still ahead of the league average. I think some of the flying picks that we've picked between rounds 5 and 7, haven't all really panned out like other teams pan out. But then at the same time, it's 5 to 7. There's a reason why they're drafting those people at rounds 5 to 7 equally. We've had wide receivers that we draft in the 2nd to 4th round that are better than first rounders. So, like, you got to take the wins and losses. It's not a perfect science.
I'm just surprised you got into a fight on Twitter. I thought Twitter was a really nice place. Isn't that where you go to make friends?
Yeah, your best friends. That's where you go to find your the godparents of your kids.
That's very interesting because I still think back to when they drafted Shazier and Shazier got hurt. He could have changed the whole culture. He was just a great footballer. And what would have happened if we had Shazier? And then also we bring in now Minka. Minka's really got something's going to happen next year with Minka. I think if he gets more time to not be the guy who stops and run every single play, I think he'll be able to get around and see what can happen in that defense. So 100%. I think overall, like, Colbert had the way you're explaining it, Colbert's had a pretty good year with the Steelers, and we should be thankful. But obviously, it does feel like we are missing things because we are meant to win a Super Bowl every single year because we've been, privileged that way. I guess I don't know, but it's going to be interesting too. What's the kind of feeling do you think having Colbert there to draft, but then he can't?
Yeah, so lead. It's funny.
It's so weird, right?
Right. Now, I know that there's some of our colleagues at BTSC that are really passionate of Colbert should get to draft and all the rest of it. If you're doing an internal promotion with Brandon Hunt and Omar Khan, which I'm more than happy with, let Colbert draft. But it's a bit like the defensive coordinator position, but I think it's even in a kind of almost worse or more negative situation. If you're a GM, one, you come into the Steelers, they have a way where you don't necessarily have the full reign that other GMs have. And that's also, that depends on your experience as a GM. If you're a new GM, teams give you less, flexibility, let's say, or they give you less of the reins. But then you don't even get to this year, you don't even get to pick your draft. I'm a bit, I don't know. And look, obviously there's owners across the league like that. But all I would say is that, a GM needs to live and die by the players that they bring into the organization, whether it's through the draft, free agency, however else trades. The conversations we have about Canada right now, about he didn't have the players to fit his offense. We'll be having those conversations for 2 or 3 years with the GM. So I'm a bit, I don't know. But then part of me thinks, God, I'd love another Colbert draft, right? I'd love him to finish off with a wide receiver that no one expected. I'd love him to get a quarterback that we didn't necessarily pick. And this is why I think Carson Strong, I know they want mobility, but I think Carson Strong and Desmond Ridder are more Colbert-style quarterbacks. That's just what I think.
Even to a point, though, I know on my last day when I was working in some of the jobs I've done, you never really work your hardest. So if it's going to be his last
I
draft,
found my last days some of the busiest days trying to leave a good legacy. And that's why I wrote this. That's why I put it in the title for today's show: is what legacy is Colbert going to leave, and how much of a legacy is he carved out?
You and I are different people then, Matty. Because if I was told to go and do X amount of hours and get everything ready and to get all the office sparky clean, I'd be like, I'm going to lunch. Mate, I've done my 22 years. You'll be right without me for one day.
Yeah.
It will be interesting though to see his last draft and like you said, all those stats too. And what you're exactly, we probably won't know until 2 or 3 years time, like you said, because if it works out with Canada or doesn't, we're going to either shoot ourselves in the foot maybe, or we're going to have our chance to go and win hopefully some football games and win a playoff game and get better and try and win the North. The whole thing's changing.
But that's what's so hard. It's just going to be so interesting. Like, it's not an exact science because there's so many variables and there's a lot of luck, right? Like Shazier, let's say he went off for that play. Doesn't happen.
Yeah. I think we miss him too. He was like such a freak accident, and that really sucked. And that we could have been really, honestly, we could have built around him too on the defense. We could have been in AFC Championship games. He was just
But that was the other thing. You think about the game that they got smacked against the Jacksonville Jaguars, and John Bostic's in there. Like, I mean,
yeah. Well, and then the year after they beat us, or didn't John Bostic get the interception on us? Like when it was a Washington.
Yeah,
team?
don't even. It just sends me up the wall. It's like, honestly. But Mark, before we wrap up the show, we've got 1 or 2 minutes. Anything else you wanted to finish off this week? I think we've talked out. Look, to wrap this up, my final thoughts on Colbert is incredible career. Been really interesting to see how he sets the team up for success. And I think he's going to want to make moves, which is why I could see the drafting up as well. I think he's going to want to make moves to leave a real legacy with this Steelers team and set Coach T up, even more for a few more years yet and really leave that mark on the franchise, regardless of whether they promote internally. I think they will promote internally, but we'll see.
Yeah, I'd just probably say, thanks to Colbert, mate. Like, honestly, as a fan, I know nothing about you, but you've done well. You don't really know. You see him on the TV every draft, and you see him with his like little husky voice talking about the Steelers, and he's probably a really good person. The winning record, he helped us out win 2 Super Bowls. We had a chance. We lost 1. We're 15 and 12 in the playoffs. We've done pretty well over 20 years. All the great players, all the great times. And if we didn't have it, we could be a really, really bad team. Like a really bad team. And every week would be like, I hope we can win this one. But we have a chance in the dance pretty much every single year with him. He's got big shoes to fill, man. They have big shoes to fill, and this transitional period going to the new QB, new offense, you've got Najee at running back, and this would be the time I'd say, don't waste Najee. Okay, yes, people would say maybe we wasted AB, but you've got Najee at running back, dude. He's a fantastic running back, and he always churns the motor over. Get that guy a good O-line in front of him. Get some guys who are built with muscle and power, and we can use the running game to win us games, get up by 10, 13 points, get some good defense going. And TJ, like I said to you, I still cannot believe this. 2 things I can't believe for this season is that Travis Kelce threw a TD on us and that TJ Watt got 22 sacks and we couldn't win a playoff game. That's the 2 things I can't believe that happened this season. It's just,
when Ben threw 5,000 yards and the same thing.
What's that? Sorry?
When Ben threw 5,000 yards last and we couldn't do it.
I hear you. Well, that's what it was. Almost defensive player of the year, Matty. He better be defensive player of the year this year. Otherwise, I'm not coming back on the show. Ever.
Wow, Mark finishing up with a big statement. But with that threat, we'll finish up this week's Steelers Touch Down Under. I'm Matty Peverell with Marky D as always. Mark,
go Steelers.